Hey everybody, it's Dowden, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to make music like Mind Against and Colyn in a similar style of the label Afterlife, which is Tale of Us's label. It's going to be a melodic house and techno track. For the Afterlife style of Mind Against and Colyn, we have really deep and dark kick and bass line, and they sound like this. The percussion is simple but complex and full of energy and organic feel, and it sounds like this. And last, we have dark but beautiful melodies that fill out the track, and they sound like this. As usual, check the description below for the project files, which include the samples, presets, all the MIDI information, everything that's included in this project. And if you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe with notifications on so you get more videos like this one. Okay, so the way I'm going to do this is go through each individual instrument and kind of explain how I got there, what kind of sounds are associated with this style of Mind Against and Colyn, and go through the MIDI information and effects and everything, creating those sounds as well so that you know how to make the sounds that I used in this video. So I'm going to go first with the kick drum. And of course, the kick drum in this style is either really clean or really aggressive because it's more techno oriented. A lot of Mind Against tracks have techno kicks in them. They're a bit more aggressive, but a lot of Colyn tracks are a little bit more melodic, so I stuck with a more clean kick. Let's take a listen. It's a pretty simple kick from one of my sample packs, and it's tuned to E, which is the key of the track, so I can open up my EQ and take a look, and we're hitting around E, the 42 hertz area. So I'm actually pretty happy with the kick. It's nice and punchy. We could probably push the punch up a little bit more here. But other than that, it's fairly well balanced. Maybe I'll throw a drum bus on there. Get it sounding just a little bit punchier. Perfect. I like how that sounds, so I'm just going to leave that and move on right away to the next element, which is this tom perk. So it's not necessarily a bass, but it's something that's kind of pulling the rhythm as well with the kick drum. And I'm going to grab this sample called Kick Boot Kick. So we got a sampler. I'm going to throw it on that channel, and I'm going to grab my sample. Listen with the kick. Pretty groovy, pretty popular pattern. But I want to make sure that I'm in the right tuning. So I'm going to open up another EQ, and let's try the tuner as well. But, you know, tuners don't always work. So let's just take a look. It's a little between G and F sharp, really close. So I'm going to go into the pitch and change this. I'm going to detune this by 50 up here. And right at 50, we're hitting right in that G. And we're in E, so I'm going to transpose this down from a G to F sharp to F to E. Maybe down one or two more of these. It's more in the center. Double check with the EQ. And cut that low end out, because I don't actually want this as a bass. That sounds pretty good. In the background to kind of give it some more groove. Next, I'm going to work on the actual bass. So I'm going to just grab a wavetable, and I have some MIDI information here. So this bass line is a little bit interesting. It's not your typical bass line. I want to make something that's groovy and fun, but a little bit unique. I'm going to create the sound as we're listening to this bass line, and at the end of the bass line creation, we're going to use something called velocity tracking to make the bass line even more interesting. So I'm going to open up the sound. We're going to put it into a sawtooth wave, turn the filter down. We're going to make a pluck. I'm turning this from 12 to 24. I'm going to take the sustain down, and envelope 2, I'm going to also take the sustain down, but I'm going to take it down all the way. Decay, I'm going to keep at 600. Release is fine at 600. I'm going to go into the matrix and put envelope 2 on this frequency here. So I'll bring this right down to 200, and I'll increase this up to about 30. We'll try that and see how it sounds. And you'll notice I have that extra octave up higher. So I have the full function on. I'll pull this out so it's a little bit easier to see. But I have the E playing, and then I have that octave. It makes it a bit more groovy. going back into the sound. It's a pluck, but it's a little high, so I'm going to reduce this octave. I'm going to bring in oscillator 2, bring that down a whole octave as well. Maybe take that envelope down a little bit more. Frequency down a little bit more. Let's bring this back up to 30, and we'll have that frequency down at 1. Let's do 140. So this nice crunchy bass line, gonna turn the volume up a little bit on that. So it's a nice bass line, but I'm gonna make it even more interesting by adding a bit of velocity tracking. So I'm gonna go into MIDI, and I'm going to turn up this velocity onto filter 1 frequency. Maybe open that cutoff a little bit more. So you can hear that it's kind of like a rolling now, and those longer notes sound just a little bit different because the velocity is different. So each one of these amounts changes the amount of cutoff that is opening up in the filter. So you can see that longer note opens the filter a little bit more. I think that sounds pretty cool. So I'm going to actually duplicate this into this bass top here. So now this bass top is the exact same as the bass that we have here. The difference is I'm going to raise the octave from -12 to 0 and from -24 to -12. So now this one's 1 octave higher, that's all. I'm going to open up the cutoff a little bit more, and then I'm also going to EQ out most of the low end. And I'm going to add an EQ to this bass as well, so we can really see what's going on with this bass. Cut out that sub frequency that I don't need below, 25 hertz, 30 hertz. So it's going up all the way here. I'm going to go into bass top. I'm going to cut out anything below that second or third octave of E. So right about here. That octave E is there. I don't need anything above that. Below that, because I have my other bass definitely hitting that. And we just have this now. And lastly, I'm going to add a delay. And I'm going to use a filter on the delay as well, just in case we're not grabbing any of those lower frequencies. Drop the feedback, drop the dry wet. Just gives us a bit more of a rolling, grooving feel. Let's take a listen to all three now. Cool, sounds pretty good. I'm going to reduce the cutoff of both bass lines here, actually. I'm going to bring this down a little bit and go up to the first bass and bring that down a little bit. So it's just a bit more of a lower layer. Maybe turn that second oscillator off in here. Okay, so now I'm going to focus on the drums. So with Mind Against and Colyn, a lot of their drums are a little bit, simple complexity. So they're simplistic in nature, but they're super complex. They're moving. So they might, just be a couple hi-hats, a couple different percussive elements, and, a couple different patterns, but there's a lot of movement going on. There's a lot of realism. There's a lot of organic flavor to that to make them really interesting. So I'm going to show you a couple things that you can do to make your drums more realistic and more organic and more moving as the track is playing through. So we just have this first hat. Just playing on the offbeat. What I'm going to do is grab this hat and I'm just going to duplicate it. When I duplicate it now, they're both going to play on this C1. So if I open up the piano roll, they're both going to play when I hit this. Just the same signal. All it's doing is just amplifying it at this point. So I change this receive to C from a C sharp, and now they're their own note. I already have the MIDI information laid out here, and you can see that these notes are much quieter in velocity, much lower in velocity. And we can take a listen to how that sounds. So it's a bit more swingy, more fun, but I want to make these more of like a shaker, like an accent hat. So it's not just repeating the same hat over and over. I'm just going to fade in the second hat here. We can solo it to hear how it sounds compared to the first one. It's a lot lighter on the ear. It's not so harsh and aggressive sounding, and it just makes for a better kind of accent hat. And then, of course, going in and actually changing the position a little bit of each of these hits is going to make it more realistic, which I've already done here. Move that one. duplicate that over. And of course, we can add a velocity tool to our hat as well, so that it's playing different velocities every single time. So I'm just going to turn the random up just a few. What this is doing is allowing the velocity to change just a little bit every time that it hits, and it's going to be randomized. And if you don't know what the difference in velocity means, it's essentially just how hard the note is being pressed, which can change different parameters, but basically it's just making the volume feel a little bit louder, a little bit quieter. So I want to make this first hat have a little bit of tail as well, so that it's nice and crispy high end. So I'm going to grab a reverb, but before I do that, I'm going to have my returns and sends open. So return here. Now I have this drop audio effects. I'm going to drag the reverb down into that, and that's going to give me a reverb return track. And now that I have my return track there, I can open up my sends, and this is going to open up here. I'm going to send that first hi-hat into the reverb. So we have it. Let's just put it all the way up, see how it sounds. Click on the reverb, 100% dry wet because it's a return track. I usually want to have 100% return. And then I want to have my decay time, like 1.2 actually is pretty good. I'm going to put the low cut on, and I'm really going to cut everything but the high end. I'll solo the reverb so we can just hear what we're getting. Maybe a little bit longer. So we're just getting that nice crispy high end. Gonna add a utility and really push the width of that reverb. Push this to maybe like 180. So we have a really nice wide reverb tail. And let's hear it all together. Great. So now I'm going to switch over to the open hat. So open hat, pretty simple. Just a basic open hat, just on the offbeat. A lot of times in these tracks, they'll either have a really crispy, nice, tight open hat, or one that's a little bit more, expressive, like a tech house hat. But either way, just having it a little bit quieter in the background is usually what I find in these tracks. This is a bit gritty, so I'm going to EQ out some of that low end. I'm just going to grab this over here. And the more you EQ out, the less of a aggressive kind of tech housey open hat it sounds, and more of a deeper one where it's just grabbing that high end tail. And I'm going to do the same thing as before with that stereo, that width, but I'm going to do it with, and I'm going to add a stereo delay to this as well. So I'm going to grab a delay. I'm going to throw that on the open hat, and this is called the has effect. I do this in a lot of my videos. Put the feedback to 0, dry wet to 100%, and change these from their synced time to about between 7 and 40 milliseconds. We're going to get a nice wide spread of sound now in that open hat. Moving on to the tambourine. So this is actually a more unique pattern, and let's just take a listen to it as is. It's a little offbeat, that little hit that we have there. And I'll open up the actual sample, and you can see that there's two kind of breaks in it, like there's two spots. I want to cut that out. I don't want that tail end. I just want that, and I'm just going to fade out slightly. Perfect. So now with this, I wanted to do something a bit more expressive, a bit more, unordinary, not so to the grid of just 4x4, like offbeat, on beat. So these are accenting tambourine hit. A lot of the time, these percussive elements really carry the track on a more substantial level by having these layers that are a little bit more rhythmic and a little bit more expressive and wide and more interesting. Not so, 4x4 typical dance music style percussion. So the tambourine, I'm going to do some effects to it. I'm going to process it a little bit, but this second one is also worth noting that adding that little bit of swing, that second hit, is also really effective in keeping the groove going. So let's listen without that little hit and with. So it's groovy, it's fun, it's a little bit different. It's not just, the same as shakers and open hats. And then the second hit, gives it more expression, more energy, and makes it a little bit more groovy. But it's still not that interesting. It needs more processing. It needs more pizzazz, more shazam, more spirit fingers. So I'm going to grab a vocoder, and I'm going to throw that on the entire channel. And I'm going to turn the Tambo Jiggy. I love that name. I'm going to turn it down a little bit. It's a little bit loud. I'm going to pan it a little bit to the left. You know what? I'm going to put this has effect on it as well, which is just that exact same stereo delay I just did with the dry wet 100% feedback in the time like this. And now it's going to be really wide when it hits. Turn the vocoder off so we can hear it. Maybe a little bit less. Just filter out some of that. Okay, so this is where the magic comes in. And I hear this in a lot of these melodic house and techno tracks. I've heard Adriatic do it. I've heard Tale of Us do it. And of course, I've heard Mind Against do it. Afterlife style of hats where you have like this white noise going through a lot of the track, like these white noise hits, and they're always changing, they're always evolving. And it's really, really cool and really fun, and it really elevates the track. So I'm going to show you the way that I'm doing it here. It's not the only way, but it is a fun way, and it's really cool. So I'm going to have my vocoder on. I'm going to cut out most of that low end. I don't need so much of it. Focus more on the highs. And I'm going to have the dry wet down quite a bit. But let's bring it right down to 0, or like 5%. And the release can sit around, 150 is fine. And we can just take a listen. Turn up the dry wet. We're getting that like crispier sound. So bring it back down. I would do 10%. And I'm going to automate both of these. So I'm going to show automation. And I'm just going to actually record the automation and just start bringing them up and down. And it's going to get this really cool effect. Maybe I'll record for a longer period of time here. Let's do this whole section here. I'm going to build up a little bit at the end and hit record. Doesn't sound like much yet, but it will. Maybe some little scraggles here and there. Now we have all these little hits here. You can push them up more if you want, get a couple peaks. And now I'm going to do the same thing on the release setting. It's going to make it sound even more interesting now. It's going to hit record and do the same thing. Make sure that your automation arm is on, or else you won't be able to record automation. That's this button here. And let's go ahead, hit record. Put the dry wet up here and the release down here. So we're getting that like top layer of white noise scratchiness over the entirety of the track. And if you want to fine tune it, of course you can make some peaks and valleys, etc. But let's just move on for this example. And let's listen to all the drums we have now, especially combining that white noise tambourine with the rest of the track is going to sound pretty neat. And of course, we want to throw some reverb on there as well. I'm going to just drag and drop a reverb onto that tambourine. Let's do a pretty decent amount of reverb. Some EQ. Cut out that low end. And maybe just a little bit more reverb. Maybe some auto pan on there, make it even more interesting. Last element I'm going to add is just a clap. So I have this clap 707, just sounds like this. A lot of the time, these melodic house and techno tracks will have either a really clean snare or maybe one that's a bit intentionally aggressive. So I like this one. It's pretty clean, but it's kind of also a bit, white noisy. So sometimes we have like these little accent claps that are just in the background to make it more interesting. So what I'll do is I'll draw in here something like this. And then I'll actually duplicate this clap. Open up the chains, duplicate, open up the ins and outs, change this again from a C1, we'll change it to C sharp. And let's filter out that high end a little bit on this clap. So we'll grab an EQ. And I'm going to filter out a lot of that low end, add a big reverb on there, just on that second clap, and go into the actual MIDI information. And I'm going to grab those extra notes I just put in and put them on the other clap. Maybe turn down the reverb a little bit. It's a little bit too excessive. And turn down the volume a little bit. Cool. It's pretty simple, but effective. Sounds pretty good so far. I think the clap needs a little bit less low end in the overall sound. So I'm gonna grab an EQ and throw it on the end of the chain. And let's boost up the high end just a little bit. Also the clap, I think it's a little bit too much on the tail. So I'm gonna just take a little bit of the tail off and fade it out. Just a little bit cleaner of a clap. Okay, now let's listen to the kick with the bass and the drums all together. I think the drums and the kick and the bass need to come down just a few dB each, and then we can move on to some of our synths. First, I have these 3 pads. I have a top pad, a lower pad, and what I call an eerie pad. So I'm gonna open up the top pad. If you don't have pigments and you still want the pads, you can grab the audio files from the project file. So if you still want to use these pads, even though you don't have pigments, I will include an audio rendition, like a render of these pads in the project file. So if you download it, you can still use the exact sound of the pads, even if you don't have pigments. So with melodic house and techno, a lot of the time you're using minor scales. Minor scales are more sad, more dark sounding. So I'm using the E minor scale here. So the E minor scale is actually pretty easy to remember. I'm just going to draw it out for you. So we go E. The only sharp in the E minor scale is F sharp, and the rest are all no sharps or flats. So G, A, B, C, D, and then E again. So we have E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D, and then the octave of E. So now that I have all these notes here, I can select all of them, and I can actually click the fold button. And this is going to fold, so we're only using those specific notes. So you really can't mess up when you're pressing different keys in our piano roll. We're for sure using the ones in E minor. So I'm just going to get rid of those. What I can actually do is just push this over to the left here. And now I have all these notes, and these are the ones I did before. So I have 2 different octaves. I'm actually going to unfold and bring this down 1 octave by pressing shift and down. And now I have fold again. I have 2 octaves worth from E3 to E4, and then E4 to E5 of notes in this piano roll that I can use, and it's going to stay within the E minor scale. So that just keeps it really, really easy for me in case I'm not too good with my scales yet. So now I've chosen this E and down to the B, and it gives us this bit of eerie sound, a little bit, minor sounding chord. I'm going to change this preset to this strings here, and we're going to go to choral strings. Then I'm going to turn off engine 2, and we're just going to be using engine 1 from this pigments. We get this nice minor sounding chord. So I'm going to turn this down quite a bit. It's going to be more in the background. It's just kind of there to create some tension. And then I'm going to duplicate this just by grabbing this pigments, duplicating it onto the low pad. And it's going to be the same MIDI, except it's 1 octave lower. So we have E4 and B3. This one is just E3 and B2. It's the exact same pad, but we're just now an octave lower. I'm just going to lower that in volume as well. Maybe pan 1 to the left, 1 a little bit to the right. And now we can process these a little bit differently and have different volumes as well. Then last, I'm going to duplicate 1 more time into the eerie pad. And then I'm going to turn off engine 1 and only use engine 2 in this pad. Engine 2 is on, engine 1 is off with the same MIDI from the first one. So I'm going to take this MIDI, just that E4 and B3, take a listen to that. So we have a higher pad, a mid-lower pad, and this eerie pad that's going to create a bit of tension and movement. With the eerie pad, so I'm going to put an auto filter on there, and I'm going to use the LFO to give it a little bit of movement. Here it's opening and closing. You can do that amount quite a bit, and then put a bit of reverb on there as well, smooth it out. And then I'm going to put the amount up, so it's really closing and really opening, and then I'm going to turn the rate down. Even slower. So while the track's playing, that pad's going to come in and out following this LFO, and it's just going to be a little bit more movement, not so oriented to the grid and stuck on the grid. Next, I'm moving on to this Ryhtmic Lead sound. So this Ryhtmic Lead is going to add a lot of really organic flavor to the song. It's going to give it a sense of, a lot of width and movement, and it's going to make it feel a little bit less robotic. So what I'm going to do is grab a wavetable, throw that on there. First, I'm going to grab an arpeggiator and throw it on there. And then the note I have here is just a B3. So I've just taken, again, that same in the E minor scale, same as what we have here with the E3 and the B2, or the E4 and the B3. I'm just keeping it consistent with the notes, using that B. We have that ARP. I'm going to change this to a sawtooth. Second oscillator, going to lower the octave by one. Lower it by 1 octave. Lower the volume. Put on a bit of unison. Going to bring the frequency down to 175, around there. Change this to 24. And I'm going to put the envelope 2 matrix up on the filter to about 30. So we have a little bit of a pluck going on. Now what I'm going to do is turn LFO 1 off the retrigger. So I'm going to turn that retrigger off because I want this LFO to be working as it's going through. So I want it to follow along the LFO. If we have retrigger on, every time that arpeggiator starts over the note, which is going to be every 16th beat, then it's going to restart the LFO. We're not really going to get any movement out of this LFO. So LFO 1, turn that rate down to maybe 0.3 hertz. The amount down a little bit as well. And I'm going to go into the matrix and put that onto the frequency as well. So now we're going to get movement of that filter opening up. Now I'm going to put LFO 2. This is going to give it even more movement. I'm going to turn the retrigger off, and I'm going to control, with this, LFO 1's rate. So I'm going to click on that. Go into the matrix. We have LFO 1 rate. I'm going to put this up. I'm going to put the LFO 2 amount down as well. And let's put this to 1/8. We're going to change this from frequency to notes here. So we have 1/8. Okay, so I'm going to put the amount of this actually all the way to 100, and this LFO I'm going to bring down to about 30%. And I'm going to put the attack of the amplitude up to about 40 or 50. We got this nice movement, nice moving ARP. Okay, now for some processing, I'm going to add my favorite filter delay, Wanderer, which is just a preset. And then it's going to sound way cooler already. Let's take a listen. And last but not least, I'm just going to throw an echo on there to get it even more width, even more movement. It's going to be a really nice sound. Some reverb on the echo. Some stereo width. Let's hear it with those 3 pads. Next, we're going to go on to the lead sound, which I know you've all been waiting for because this is going to be the most important part of this track. This nice, gritty, analog sounding, wafty, cool lead, which gives melodic house and techno just its great character. So let's go ahead and jump into that. So for this sound, I use Serum. You can do this in Wavetable as well. Just follow along with what I'm doing. It's pretty much going to be the same, but I like the effects that it has in Serum that I wanted to use for this. So I'm going to start off with just one oscillator. I'm going to put the decay of this envelope 2 down pretty quick to about 200, 230 sounds good. The attack I'm going to put to 60 milliseconds or 50 or 60 milliseconds. That's a pretty good sweet spot. Sustain I'm going to bring down all the way to 0, and release I'm just going to bring up a little bit. Doesn't really matter too much. Around 230 is fine. Go back to envelope 1, which is our amplitude envelope. Bring the attack to around the same, 50, 60. Sustain I'm going to leave up. Decay I'm going to bring down to about 500, and release, but the same thing. Just a little bit, maybe 500 or 600. Just a little bit of tail on the sound. Give it a little bit of an attack, and then I'm going to turn the filter on, put this to low pass, put this to low, 24, bring the cutoff down just a little bit, and then I'm going to put envelope 2 onto this cutoff here. So we're already getting that nice wafty sound. Let's turn up the volume a little bit. Maybe a little bit more. And let's play it along with the melody that I have here. And I'm going to explain a little bit about how I got this melody, this Mind Against style melody. So what you're trying to go for with this is, again, using that E minor scale and just really focusing on spreading out between a few different octaves. With this style of melodic of music, the melodic house and techno genre, and a lot of, Colyn and Mind Against style, Afterlife style tracks, you're going to have a lot of these low notes really quickly jumping up to these higher notes, these kind of ARPy style synths. So we have a spread of almost 3 octaves here. We have the low notes, and then we have a couple higher notes. And this spread gives a really, really eerie kind of detuned style when used properly. So if you are writing these melodies, a lot of Mind Against tracks, the way that Mind Against writes their melodies is it's catchy, it's groovy, but it's got that dark undertone. So let's keep working on this sound. Put the second oscillator. So I'm going to put the second oscillator down 1 octave. I'm going to put the unison up on both to 5, and the detune down quite a bit, and the blend down a little bit. Turn the filter on for oscillator B. We're going to add some white noise as well, and I'm going to put the filter on for the white noise. Level up, and let's put the pitch up. Change this from AC hum to white noise. Turn that down a little bit. Awesome. And now to get even more movement and even more, entertainment out of the sound, make it more interesting and more professional, I'm going to grab an LFO, and I'm going to throw that LFO, I'm going to grab number 2, I'm going to throw it on the cutoff. It's going to open and close the cutoff filter and make it feel really interesting and really cool. I'm going to press Alt-Shift on Windows. I think it would be Option-Shift on Mac. And it's going to change this LFO so that it's opening and closing, not just going from one way to the right. And then it's going to open and close the cutoff filter and make it sound even more interesting. So let's fine-tune this LFO here. Let's go basic. I'm going to go sine wave and slow it down. Maybe this LFO go a little higher. Bring this up a little bit. Maybe let's just have it go unipolar. Maybe push the drive up a little bit. And we can put this LFO on some other things, like the detune maybe a little bit. And maybe we can do the panning just a little bit. Okay, so that sounds pretty good. We'll maybe do some fine tuning, but let's go into the effects and let's put on some chorus. The chorus is going to make it sound nice and wide as well. Put some delay on there, some reverb. Usually you want a nice big sounding reverb for style like this. Long decay times. Let's hear it with those pads now. I'm going to bring the volume of this one down a little bit, the higher octave, and bring the lower octave up. And I'm going to put some distortion effects on there, bring the mix down a little bit. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pull down the cutoff a tiny bit. And I'm going to add some velocity tracking. So I'm going to put this on here, add just a little bit of maybe 9 or 10. Let's take a listen. Pull the cutoff down a little bit more. And what I'm going to do is in the MIDI information, I'm going to take some of these notes, these higher notes. And I'm really going to push the velocity of those a little bit louder. And what's going to happen is when they play these higher notes, it's actually going to sound a little bit more open in the cutoff. It's going to sound a little bit more expressive and higher in the cutoff frequency. It is competing with the LFO and the other cutoff. Let's put it up a little bit more. So it is helping open it up a little bit more, but we do have the LFOs, of course, opening and closing. So I'm going to push this a little higher like this. So this green dot here is showing us where the velocity is. So those really high notes I want to open up a lot. So let's push this all the way over here. So this is the regular note. And these are the higher notes. It's a little subtle, but it is adding just a little bit extra of the cutoff opening up in the higher notes. Let's go on to our final sound now, which is this grit pad. And this pad is going to add just an extra layer of darkness to this style. Before I move on to that, actually, I do want to EQ this this sound as well. I want to take out some of that low end of the lead just to make sure we're not interfering. There we go, that's good. So for this grit pad, I'm going to duplicate the lead into here. And then I have the MIDI information from E minor again. So it's E down to a C2. Let's just take a listen to how that sounds. I want to increase the attack of this. So it's more of like a wafting sound. And increase the release. I'm going to bring this down an octave. Let's change this to wah-wah. I'm going to put, let's put this LFO2 onto the wavetable position. Get some movement in that wavetable, and let's put some FM synthesis on here. So FM from B. Turn that white noise off. Let's turn that cutoff up. Maybe turn that down a little bit. Yeah, find that sweet spot. Nice. Let's get some more chorus on there. Feedback up. And let's turn that drive up on that. Yeah, nice and gritty. Get it real dutty. Okay, and then I'm just going to add some EQ. I don't want this to be super low because I do have my bass line going on at the same time. And then I want reverb on there. Sounds pretty good. So for this quick arrangement, I'm going to just duplicate these kicks over. I'm just going to kind of build as I go. A lot of these melodic house and techno tracks, they're not, they usually start pretty basic. They don't have too much going on, maybe some pads and things. I'm going to turn off all the drums here. I'm not going to use any drums at the beginning. Turn off the lead for now. Turn off this for now. Turn everything off. These pads I'm going to use. A lot of the melodic house and techno, they start with just a kick drum, maybe a bass line, but one or two percussive elements. And I'm just going to kind of mix as I go along, things that stand out to me that are too loud or too quiet. These pads, for example, are too loud. Maybe EQ some of that low end out as well of these high pads. I'm going to turn off all the drums individually and turn this on. I'm going to let that play out till about maybe here, and let's bring in that top of that bass. And I'm going to filter that in. So I'm going to go over here, grab a filter on number 8, and put it like this, and filter that in. Let's go to 30 hertz, and then very quickly open that up. So I'm actually going to open it up about halfway, and then the rest of the way I'll go up to about here. Turn my automation lock on so it doesn't do that. And And then at about 30 seconds, I'm going to bring in the hat. So I'm going to start bringing in some instruments. I'm not going to bring the bass line in until a minute mark. So let's go ahead and pull this all over, duplicate that. And let's get up to about a minute 30 here. So I'm going to go, let's bring in maybe the tambourines first. Let's go ahead with this bass line. Turn on the tambourine. Building up. This, yeah, it's going to be too up front. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to filter in that high end. And I'll probably actually... I'll do it a bit quicker, but I'm probably going to actually turn down that dry wet on those tambourines right away. So I'll duplicate this over a few times. Like that. And go to the frequency and fix that, because there's going to be a bunch of these. Here we go. Going over to the release time and the dry wet, I'm going to turn that down. So 1.25 seconds release time is good, but the dry wet I want to turn down to about maybe 20% here. And then I'm going to, that didn't duplicate over. Let's grab all this and push this over here, and then just duplicate that over. Coming in even a little bit slower. And then right at this mark, I can actually bring in that hat as well. Might as well. I'm gonna bring the ear pad in randomly. Keep it interesting. Maybe take that kick out right before the bass line comes in. Okay, so that's pretty good, but let's bring in maybe that lead right away at the minute mark. I'm actually going to shorten this up like this. Maybe like this. For the first few notes. And I'm going to really start off that cutoff pretty low. So I'm going to configure, cutoff, bring that down. Bring up to 25, maybe here, and bring this pretty low. And let's do the high end as well, because we do have a lot going on in that high end. So I'm just gonna, filter that just like that. I want a little bit more delay on there actually, so let's push this up a bit. Push this up right before the breakdown. I'm gonna go into breakdown here. Okay, bring this up a little bit, and the cutoff I'll bring up. I'm going to draw in some random notes here. I'm going to hold Alt and just draw in kind of randomly, give it some space to breathe and build, and then here I'll just drop it kind of back down and do a couple of these little spikes as well. Planning on doing a little breakdown here. It might not line up right now, but I'll fix that in just a sec. Duplicate this over. Let's bring this open hat over Keep it interesting right on here. Turn that on. And get rid of it here. And then, of course, the clap is the only drums left. So we'll bring that in the same time as the open hat. And then we have two more things, the Ryhtmic Lead and the grit pad. And I'm actually going to duplicate this Ryhtmic Lead and create this nice little side melody. So I forgot to do that in the beginning, in the earlier part of the video. So I'm going to add this little nice accent sound. So I'll get rid of it for now. But at about 30 seconds in, I'm going to start bringing this sound in, and I'm going to have it go throughout most of the track. And again, I'm going to use filtering. So filtering is really great for controlling, fading things in a little bit easier, so it's not so aggressive, not so obvious. Sometimes it's fun to fade things in or like filter things in not on 32 or 16 beats, just kind of like off the grid a little bit. So I'll start it over here. I'll put the dry wet of the echo up to 100. Turn this volume down a little bit. Turn it down some more. Bring the hat here and the clap here. Actually, no, I'm going to bring that in over here. We're almost done the arrangement. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. And this nice little breakdown. Let's do 4 more things here. We'll put the kick in for about 4 more beats, or 4 more bars, sorry. And the breakdown will happen at 1:30 and then come back in. Okay, so this breakdown's happening. I'm going to bring it back in at around 2:20. So duplicate this over actually. Okay, so I have everything laid out pretty much up until this breakdown. So I have the kick and the bass line, the drums all figured out. And then I'm going to just go into this breakdown where I'm going to put in this gritty pad. Let's go ahead and drop that in. And go over here. Let's duplicate that over so that when it drops back in, it plays. Keep this going. Let's do it one more time. Let's go cutoff, frequency up, and EQ 8 up. That's going to build with the track, and then this is going to be like a nice little drop here. Cut down that cutoff filter. Just kind of playing throughout the drop. I'm not going to go too far into the drop, just until here. Maybe build some more drums out. Keep these pads going throughout the entire track. Keep these eerie pads going. And let's grab the drums and just kind of duplicate this last section over from the drop. What's happening here? When the drop happens, I'm going to have pretty much just the tambourines come in, which I think will sound pretty cool. And then, of course, we need our bass line for that section. The last thing I'm going to add is this extra rhythmic pad that I was talking about, this the Ryhtmic Lead. I'm going to add just like this little sub lead really quickly. Consolidate this. I'm going to change some of these notes in this Ryhtmic Lead so that's a little bit more emotional sounding and a little bit more enticing to listen to. And Mind Against has these really beautiful breakdowns and melodies in their tracks. Let's go ahead and do that. So I'm dropping it to from the B to the A, G, F sharp, and E. I'm going to duplicate that over for the rest of the breakdown. And then I drop this sub lead in as well that I didn't put in earlier. It's just going to be this A, G, and E, again using the minor scale and just drawing in some fun melodies. The only difference with this one, I've just duplicated this over. I'm going to put a lot more release, a little bit more attack, and a lot more reverb. One last thing I'm going to do is actually add, one more thing I'm going to do is add tambourines in the breakdown. So I'm just going to duplicate that over a bunch of times. And let's do some automation. This, let's put this release time up, build up as it's going. And right at the end, it'll get really high up there. The dry wet will also go up. Before the drop. And then this filtering will come in as well. So let's go ahead, my rendition front to back in the style of Afterlife for Mind Against and Colyn. Okay, everybody, so I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. Make sure to grab those project files in the description below. Click that link and you get access to everything that is included in this project. If you don't have access to the synths that I used, there will be audio exports of those files as well. So even if you don't have synths like Pigments or Serum, you can still get the audio that is recorded from those sounds in this video. If you're new to the channel or haven't already, hit that subscribe button. If you learned something, make sure to hit that like button, and I'll see you in the next video.